J-Tech Studios in Atlanta, Georgia. It's America's favorite game show podcast. Tell them what they've won. And now, here are your hosts, Tom Bastek and Mike Jacobs.
And hello and welcome in episode lucky number 13 of America's favorite game show podcast. Tell them what they've won. I am Tom Bastek. Alongside of me,
I am Mike Jacobs. We are the game show guys. And wow, Tom, I didn't even think about, I was all excited about our dozen last week, but
yeah.
13, should we have skipped it and gone straight to 14? I'm not a superstitious guy, so I don't care. But
you know what? You want to hear something that's really crazy? Is that 13 has been one of my lucky numbers my entire life.
Ah, well, there you go.
So, it was my baseball number, my soccer number. It's just always been good to me. So, and my favorite day of the week is Friday. So, literally Friday the 13th, when everybody else is freaking out, is like my greatest day every time it comes up.
Well, that's awesome. Like I say, I'm not superstitious, so I don't see Friday the 13th as anything other than a day and a date.
Well, I see this as number 13, a lucky number 13, a baker's dozen, if you will.
Indeed. The one extra to eat yourself.
Oh, gosh, I could go for bagels so bad. I was thinking about bagels the other day. All right. Anyway. Well, welcome back. We are doing our feature show this week is The Joker's Wild.
The Joker's Wild. Not a show that I had familiarity with it. I knew it, but it wasn't one that I watched a whole lot. It was not very formative in my game show fandom.
Well, we'll talk more about it. I definitely watched it as a kid and enjoyed it. And I think it was the one in the early 90s that came back out that I originally saw. But I did like it at the time. I've watched it now. Not the biggest fan anymore. And I've even watched Snoop's version, which I kind of like, but it's not driving me back to watch it every day, you know?
No, I agree. I mean, Snoop's a good enough host. We talked about this earlier. I've only seen the second season. Apparently, he was not as good in the first. He must have gotten coaching or something in between seasons, but I thought he was great in the second season.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that when we get to history.
Indeed.
But right now, why don't we get into some news with our good friend, Mr. Christian Carrion.
Light up your cigarette, crack open a beer, put the kiddos to bed. From chaos around the world to carnage in your burial front yard, it's time for the news.
Thank you very much. This is the news brought to you by BuzzerBlog.com. The chase is on again. Casting has begun for a new series of The Chase. The Chase is a quiz show that began in the UK, enjoyed a very successful run, still airing to this day, and a version on GSN ran in America beginning in 2013 for a few seasons, a show that I have a little bit of personal familiarity with. Casting has begun for a new version. It is suspected that the three Jeopardy champions from this year's Greatest of All Time tournament, Ken Jennings, Brad Rutter, James Holzhauer, will have some involvement in this version. The show features a team of contestants competing against a chaser, which is a trivia expert whose job it is to prevent the team from winning. Traditionally, the chaser is a master trivia player. Some of the most famous quizzers from all over the world have taken part in the chase in its various versions around the world, and it is suspected that we could be seeing the chase on ABC sometime later this year. So if you're interested in that, check out buzzerblog.com. We do have the casting information posted there for you.
Any news if the Beast will be returning as the chaser?
I hope so, but I haven't heard anything about that yet. The Beast is an incredible player. I know he's still working on the chase in the UK, and they have a spin-off show called Beat the Chasers. I think he's involved in that as well. But yeah, here's hoping.
Cool. Maybe Christian gets a new team and tries it again.
We can only hope.
All right, what else you got?
An iconic pricing game is making its way to Target shelves. PLINKO, the popular pricing game on The Price is Right, probably the most popular, most famous pricing game, is getting an officially licensed home version. Buffalo Games has announced that they are publishing a standalone tabletop version of PLINKO for sale exclusively at Target later this year. Suggested retail price is looking to be $29.95. It looks to be about 2.5 to 3 feet tall, made to stand on a table, and it does come with some rudimentary pricing games to play to earn your PLINKO chips, but I'm sure game show fans and especially the hardcore fans will come up with some ingenious way of making it more like the show. But the opportunity to own a PLINKO board, I think, is going to be unbelievable. That is a mighty need for me this year.
Yeah, I will absolutely be purchasing one of those.
That, I've been saying to Mike over the last couple of weeks, I want more home games, personally to own them. This is a great one to start with.
For sure. My wife and I, we have a board game collection probably nearing 300 games. We've got an entire game room, and so I think that would just be a wonderful addition.
All right, Christian, do you have a This Week in Game Show History for us?
Well, I do. This week in game show history, in 1956, we have the premiere of a show that was popular originally, but came back in a much more popular version a couple decades later. I'm talking about Tic-Tac-Toe, the game of strategy, knowledge, and fun. Tic-Tac-Toe with categories and questions, premiered in the late 50s, mid to late 50s, and was originally one of the shows implicated in the quiz show scandals of the 1950s. Went away for a while, came back in 1978, hosted by the great Wink Martindale, lasted for almost a decade in syndication, and to this day remembered as one of the iconic game shows.
I have to tell you, first of all, I totally forgot about Wink until I watched an episode of this, and he came out. I was like, Wink! Oh, God, yes! One of the classic game show hosts.
Yes. Well, that was his longest running hosting job on TV. He had hosted a couple shows before that. He did Gambit, which was based on blackjack. He had hosted a couple other things. Can You Top This, which is like a comedy type thing. But Tic-Tac-Toe really made him an iconic game show host.
I don't know, Mike. Did you watch Tic-Tac-Toe growing up at all?
Not really. I've seen it probably just on like Game Show Network reruns, like when they used to show old shows late night when I was in college and stuff. But I don't have any like specific fond memories of it or anything like that. No.
The one thing I didn't realize it until I went down the rabbit hole of watching a couple of episodes recently, but I used to love watching it back in the day. The questions to me, it reminded me a lot of Jeopardy, except the questions were easier. Like I felt like I could do better on this show.
Yeah, they were definitely easier than shows like Jeopardy, and I think that was because in a lot of markets the show aired earlier in the day, and I think that there was pressure to make games like that a little bit easier for people who were watching them earlier in the morning, as opposed to Jeopardy, which is usually on 7:30 at night. So yeah, that's definitely not a coincidence. The questions were a lot easier on Tic-Tac-Toe, which maybe also explains why, there was one guy, Tom McKee, who won $300,000 on Tic-Tac-Toe. He was actually the longest serving champion in game show history for a long time, I think until Ken Jennings on Jeopardy, 20 years later.
Wow.
Yeah, he won something like 8 cars or something too. It was ridiculous. All right. This week, Christian, we're doing Joker's Wild. What's your thoughts on that?
So, I've been watching and studying and just loving game shows for years and years. And for some reason, the Joker's Wild comes up in a lot of the things that I read, because the genesis of that format had been around for a really long time. Jack Barry, for a little while, who hosted the original Joker's Wild and created it with his partner Dan Enright, he had the original idea for a game show revolving around a slot machine that would pick categories for questions. He presented it to Mark Goodson in the 60s, and he hated it. So Jack Barry set out on his own and created a pilot for the show. Now, the original pilot was shot in the late 60s, and it was hosted by Alan Ludden from Password. And it was pretty similar to the show that most people remember now. It did have the big slot machine with the 3 wheels, but instead of categories, he had a panel of 5 celebrities on stage, and instead of the categories on the wheels, he would have pictures of the celebrities, and the celebrities would be the ones to ask the questions. It almost looked like Match Game. If you were to see the set, it almost looks exactly like what Match Game would eventually look like. At the same time, his partner, Dan Enright, was based in Canada. They had been blacklisted from the television industry in America after the quiz show scandals, and they went to Canada and helped essentially set up the game show industry in Canada. Now, Dan Enright had produced a show called Line 'Em Up, and that was premiered in the mid-'60s. It was in black and white, but the familiar elements of the Joker's Wild are there. You have the little slot machine with the 3 wheels, and the object was different. You were matching up answers that made sense. You were kind of trying to stop the machine at the right place. But the technology was there, and I think at some point those ideas fused and created the Joker's Wild. Originally, the show premiered early 70s on CBS. Now, a year before that, it was tried again as a pilot called The Honeymoon Game. And this involved 6 newlywed couples answering questions together using this big slot machine. And that was billed as the first 90-minute game show. It never aired, but the attempts were made. They tried so hard to make this a thing. And really what the format had going for it was this enormous slot machine, which until that point, nothing like that had been seen on TV. Which actually, that slot machine was made out of 3 modified slide projectors. So the drums were spun onto their side. There was a notch cut sort of for each slide on the wheel, and when a contestant would pull the lever, a stagehand would spin the projector and then let the handle go, and it would click, catch that wheel, and then it would give the effect on the outside of a big slot machine. So that's how that worked.
Really?
It was just, yes. Yeah, so those were 3 just sort of hacked slide projectors.
Huh. You think about it, when you think back on it, it kind of looked like slide projectors in its own way.
Yeah, it did, definitely. And, standards and practices were had their eye on the Joker's Wild because it was theoretically very easy to modify the slides and, put more Jokers in or take categories out. So the stagehands were under very close watch. Yes, definitely.
All right, how about a plug for Buzzer Blog?
Of course, buzzerblog.com, the #1 game show website in the world. Whether you're looking for casting information on upcoming series, anything related to game shows or unscripted entertainment, buzzerblog.com is the place to go. Ask anyone in the game show industry, and they will agree. Buzzerblog.com.
Thanks so much, man.
Of course. Thank you.
All right, and for those of you, first of all, thank you, Christian, for that. And for those of you who don't know, we do record our news earlier in the week with Christian. As you may not know, we all have jobs.
Yeah, go figure. 13 episodes of podcasting does not pay the bills, believe it or not.
Not yet. But there is one really sad bit of news that we do want to pass along. I'm sure most people know by now. Regis Francis Xavier Philbin passed away this week.
Indeed. I've been trying to keep an eye on it. They did not initially say a cause of death. Apparently, it's now reportedly heart disease was the cause. So that is a damn shame. He was, I believe, 88 years old.
He was indeed,
yeah.
and he had a lot more. He had a lot of game show stuff that he did.
For sure.
Yeah, it wasn't just Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, which is what I know him from.
Right.
Actually, I know him from Regis and Kathy Lee, but that's another whole story.
Yeah. That's exactly how I remember too.
But yeah, so that's too bad. I'm sure Christian will go more into the details of that in next week's news after we've had some time to grieve on that. But to the Philbin family, I hope that they're doing all right. Hearts and thoughts and prayers and all the other good stuff.
Indeed.
All right, when we come back, you're going to face the devil, aren't you, Mike?
I'm gonna beat the devil, or is it avoid the devil, or
I don't
circumvent the devil? They sure do call that thing a lot of different names.
Just don't be anywhere around the devil. That's all you need to know. When we get back, where knowledge is king and Lady Luck is queen, we'll be talking about the Joker's Wild on America's favorite game show podcast. Tell them what they've won. Hey gang, it's Mike and Tom from America's favorite game show podcast, Tell Them What They've Won. And we want to talk to you a little bit today about how we got started with Anchor.fm.
Yeah, it's interesting with so many podcasts out there, it's not as easy to get started as you might think. And it was a pretty daunting task at first, but during my research, I came across Anchor.fm, and boy, I tell you, it seems like the perfect solution for getting started.
You said it best, Mike. They had a way to grow the podcast. We had the opportunity to put our podcast out there on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all the platforms, and then make money from the beginning with minimum listenership and then grow.
Yeah, exactly. It's the perfect platform to get everything done. They've got all the tools to edit and publish and all that kind of stuff right there, straight from your phone. Even if you don't even have a computer, you can do it. And we can start small, and we'll have features to help us every step of the way.
If you're looking to get things started on your own podcast, just download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get things started. Welcome back, the sweet sounds of Guess Who, Mike?
Well, I know, so I'm not going to answer, but I will say that their son is also a famous musician.
That's right. Alan Thicke was the composer of that theme for this game show known as
The Joker's Wild.
I think that's the second iteration or whatever. That wasn't the original theme that they had.
If you go back to the original ones from like the early 70s, that theme song is terrible. Like, it's just a bunch of like beep 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 boop boop beep beep beep. It's like not even really a song. It's just like a bunch of little sounds. It's really bad.
I will throw a YouTube version of that up on the website.
Yeah,
so
if you just find any episode from 73 on YouTube, and it's got it.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. All right, so we're into the gameplay for Joker's Wild. What do you got for us?
So the game is going to be played by two contestants, one of which they call the returning champion.
All right, can I pause you on this for a second?
Sure.
I want to talk about champion and how the game shows of the past throw this word champion out way too easily.
Yeah, I guess you're right. It really is just a winner, right?
Yeah. You answer 4 questions right, and you're the champion?
Yeah, to me, I guess a champion implies you have won against other winners in
Correct.
Some sort of contest to prove the top winner.
Well, but maybe that's an argument for another day. But anyway, I just wanted to get that 2 cents in.
Sure. I think that's a fair argument. But it's kind of semantics. They won. Call them what you want.
Fine.
But yeah, so the returning champion is whoever won the last game. Usually they can get through several games in one episode, so you'll see the returning champion return in the same episode. Otherwise, they just roll over to the next show. But what happens is they take turns spinning a giant slot machine. And the slots have either one of 5 trivia categories or a joker on it. And the jokers, appropriately enough, are wild, hence the name of the show. So the contestant spins the slots. They go round and round, and it'll land on, let's say, trivia category A is football, and then they get trivia category B, which is women's history, and trivia category 3 is a joker. So, by the way, I specifically chose women's history right there because this show seems to be pretty progressive in its representation of women. There are women categories in like every episode, so they did a pretty good job with that.
Well, I watched the very first episode, and it was very interesting because like cooking came up, and the woman that was playing in the first episode, she said she loved to cook, but it was clearly like she chose cooking, and the host was like, "Yes, cooking. I'm not surprised you chose that." And I was like, "Oh God, I was so sexist of the 1970s."
For sure.
So
and I saw that same episode, and football was another one of the categories.
Yeah.
And when it came up for the guy, they expected him to take it, but he took cooking too. So challenging gender roles in the 70s, I give them a thumbs up for that.
Yeah, right on.
Anyway, so you spin the wheel, and however it comes up, if you choose a category that is by itself, it's worth $50. If you get a pair of categories, which could also include the jokers, since they are wild, that's going to up it to $100. And if you get all 3 the same, again with the jokers included, that's going to get you 200 points. They ask you a question, or I'm sorry, $200. Ask you a question in that category. If you're right, you get that much money. If you get 3 jokers, you get to choose one of the 5 categories, and if you get that question right, you immediately win. That's it. The game is over. You win right away.
Yeah,
And-
you're the champion at that point.
Yeah, you're a champion just by pulling a lever.
Now the other thing that I thought was interesting is that you can, if you get a joker, you don't have to choose what's on the board. You can go off the board.
Right. And so when I was watching this, I hadn't really thought of that as a strategy.
Yeah, the only strategy I could figure there is if you didn't know the two categories that are on the board with your one joker, go off the board and go get
Right.
one.
Well, I was trying to think, is there a way that you could maybe choose a category that you thought the other person wouldn't know? But that's betting on yourself to lose, and I don't think that's a real
Right.
strong way to play.
I
Except
agree.
for I did see a guy bet on himself to lose for a specific reason, and it was really, really smart. So over the course of this first round, the idea is that the first to 500 wins. So had, I don't know what it was. It was, not enough that 100 points was going to win in the game. But his opponent had 400 points. So 100 points would win her the game. He spins the wheel, gets the two categories and a joker. So most people would pair the joker with a category to double it up to 100. That's not going to win him the game. And if he gets it wrong and his opponent gets it right, she would win the game. So he opted to take the category by itself worth $50. He ended up getting it wrong as he expected, but now the opponent guessed it right, but it was not enough money to win the game, so he still had another round to try and come back.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
It was some next level strategy that, good on him for thinking of that.
It's like the guy who memorized the press your luck board. If you like the
Sure.
game enough and you're going to be on it, you do the study and to figure out exactly how to game the system.
So, like I say, the first person to get $500 in this back and forth of the spinning goes on to the final round, which, as we were saying earlier, they seem to just use many different terms interchangeably. Beat the devil, face the devil, avoid the devil. Those are all kind of what they use.
Do they say anything about smacking the devil on the butt with
Right.
Snoop in Snoop's version?
Spanking the devil.
Spanking the devil. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. No, they. I think he says specifically beat the devil on the Snoop Dogg version.
Okay.
But it's the same kind of idea. You have another slot machine. Now, this time there are more options. So, like, each slot in the original run was only 6 options, right? The 5 categories or a joker. And I think they upped it to maybe 7, 8, 9. I don't remember exactly what it was, but there's more options. But instead of categories for questions, it's all money values. And then, of course, each slot on the slot machine has a potential for a devil. So the idea is you continue to spin and add up as much money as you feel comfortable. You can stop whenever you like. If you ever hit a devil on any of the 3 slots when you spin it, you're immediately done and wiped out. So you're sort
So
of...
you lose all the money then?
Yes, the money that you've built up so far in the Beat the Devil round.
Okay.
Yeah. But if you continue playing the Beat the Devil and you don't get the devil and you hit $1,000 or more, then you win the sort of grand prize of the show, which historically in the older versions was like a trip. The one that I saw very commonly, which I guess nobody won, so they just kept rolling it over, was a trip to Japan, prize packages worth several $1,000s, that sort of thing. And then later in the Snoop Dogg version, they upped it to $50,000 for beating the devil.
Cool.
And then, as far as the champion thing goes, they just keep going until defeated. I think eventually they came up with some different rules to augment that. But for the most part, until the TBS version with Snoop Dogg, the champion was the champion until dethroned. But considering the elements of luck in the show, it typically was not a big run for people. Like it was pretty easy to unseat people. It's not like in Jeopardy where the talent or the skill is the only factor. So you could just luck out and win and unseat the champion. And they did have a thing where if you won, I believe it was 5 consecutive shows, you would win a car. The Gremlin was the one I saw this morning.
Yeah, that seemed to be a pretty common thing because, remember we were talking about tic-tac-toe with Christian, and the guy who ended up going for $300,000, he won 8 cars.
Good Lord.
Yeah, plus a couple of boats and a whole bunch of other crap. I mean, it was pretty ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I guess you can hit it big in this game, but again, someone could just luck out and you're done for.
All right. Well, that's it for gameplay. Are you ready? We'll take a quick break and come back and hit up all the history.
Yeah, let's do a break.
All right. Sounds good. You've been listening to America's favorite game show podcast. Tell them what they've won. Welcome back. Segment number 3, episode number 13. It's the Joker's Wild on America's favorite game show podcast. Tell them what they've won. Michael.
Tom.
History
indeed. So the history of Joker's Wild actually begins, well, okay, this is probably true for literally everything, but it begins well before the show ever aired. Jack Barry actually initially pitched the show back in the 60s, but he did not have much luck. He did not impress the executives that were necessary to get the show on the air, but he continued working on it and tweaking the rules and whatnot, and eventually got it to a point where they decided it was worth airing, and then September 4th, 1972, it hits the air for the first time.
Now, I want to bring up two things. First of all, we will also put up, Christian sent along a video to us of that original pitch for the show before, and I don't know if you saw that, before it actually made it. He was like, same producer a decade earlier. So I will push that one out on the website.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Also, did you know, and I think I told you this, that debuting on that September 4th, 1972, in addition to Joker's Wild, the new Price is Right and Gambit at the same time.
Ooh, stiff competition.
It also happens to be today, believe it or not, that Mr. Mark Spitz was the big champion at the Olympics that day.
Ah, the Olympic swimmer, which actually ties back into the show because there was very barely. There was a contestant on an episode that I saw that they were sort of riffing for looking like Mark Spitz, and I had no idea who that was, so I had to go look him up, and I just learned yesterday that he is an Olympic swimmer.
Yep, he was in the Olympics in 1972. Obviously, was in Munich, Germany. That was the day he brought home the gold medal.
A little bit before my time.
I understand. It was before my time as well. I can honestly, truthfully say that, and I feel good about it.
Right, despite being up against Price is Right and Gambit, which maybe Gambit may not be that popular in the overall scope of game shows, but still, it also had to fight out against a talk show hosted by Dinah Shore, which I'm sure was just immensely popular, and of course the game show named that tune. But it still beat all those shows out. It was incredibly popular over the first 2 years. Did a really, really great job with the ratings. But then NBC moved its celebrity sweepstakes show to the same time slot as Joker's Wild, and that was not great. It took a huge dive. Ratings just absolutely tanked, and after a 3-year run, they scrap it in 75. But as we've seen with several other shows, that's not going to be the end of it because they kept reruns of it, and the reruns were so popular, they were like, all right, well, let's bring it back. People love this show. And September 5th, 1977, it came back and ran for another 9 years. So obviously the right move. At this point, it was paired with the aforementioned Tic-Tac-Toe as a sort of, they were sister shows to each other and ran concurrently. Or no, concurrently means at the same time, right? One after the other. I don't know what word that means.
Consecutively?
Thank you. And
my mother, who was an English teacher, is very proud that I pulled a 3-cent word out of my butt there. Go ahead.
Good job. So, that ran, like I said, for 9 years. During that 9-year run, there was also a spin-off, a kid's version called Joker, Joker, Joker. It ran from 79 to 1981. I did not find much about this one. I think it's just sort of kid-themed questions. It seems a little weird to make a casino-themed game show for children. But
yeah,
I mean,
I read something about Mark Summers jumping in there.
Oh, no
and
kidding.
hosting that for as a substitute host. He was like 22 or something, and he was like an assistant page at the studio or something.
Oh, wow. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, so speaking of the hosts, so Jack Barry is still hosting at this point, but as the years go on, his health starts to decline. He personally picked a man by the name of Jim Peck as a regular substitute host, but then when Barry finally died, they actually ended up replacing him with the dean of game show host, Mr. Bill Cullen. And he ran the show for the remainder of the time on air until May 23rd, a day after my birthday, 1986, not the same year. Yeah, that's when it ended that initial run. Now, we did see a revival in the 90s, as you mentioned earlier, but it was very much not successful. It was hosted by a man named Pat Finn, and the reason why it was unsuccessful was mainly because it was such a wild change in format from the original show. They changed the way the questions work. It was not the same show, and I think people wanted it to be. You know, that's the reason why you bring back shows, is because you want people to see the thing that they loved. And if you change it so drastically, people aren't going to be as interested. And so, yeah, that ran for, I think, less than a year, 90 to 91. I don't have the exact dates offhand, but a year at the most. And that was kind of it for a while. Then 2017 rolls around, and TBS picks it up and puts Snoop Dogg as a host, as we mentioned earlier. And, man, I love him as a host. I didn't see the first season where maybe he was still, getting his sea legs. But in the second season, he really ramps it up, and I think he's great. He just has this casual, I don't care attitude, and I love it. I love it.
It was interesting. When I have seen, when it first came out, because I liked Joker's Wild, I was like, okay, I really want to see this. And I love Snoop. So I started watching in the very beginning of the first season, and it was tough for me to watch. He was not a very good host. As a matter of fact, they even had Jeannie Mae serve as a hostess the first season. And I think the main reason she was there is because Snoop didn't really know what the hell he was doing. Notice she's not there on the second season, right, because he's figured it out. And by the time he's in the second season, he's a great host. It's wonderful.
Like I said, he must have gotten some coaching or something like that. And I mean, it makes sense. The guy has no game show history before that, or emceeing history. Like, I mean, obviously emceeing, he's a rapper, but I mean, like, being a actual host of anything, like, I'm not saying the guy's not talented or skilled, just doesn't seem like it was his avenue. It felt more like a gimmick at the first season, I guess.
Well, and the best thing about it, you know why he got picked for that, right? He went to them. He was like, I want to bring this back. It was my favorite. It was my favorite show as a kid.
That's awesome. Well, good for him then.
Yeah.
And when they brought it back, so this is sort of the same thing as the 90s. They decided to change the format a little, but I think maybe they learned their lesson, because the changes this time around were not nearly as significant. It was more money, the no returning champs. Every game was self-contained, set number of spins per round. And then during the Face the Devil round, he would try and buy you out for, stop playing or whatever, kind of like in Deal or No Deal. Mm-hmm. But otherwise, it's more or less the same show. And I think they kept enough of the original format to leave that endearing quality to it.
And I think, there's different things where he's doing little side games and little props and stuff. Like he has the snooper. I love the snooper. Have you ever seen that, where it's a little bong that sits next to him and it's smoking, and he asks it, and it's like the Alexa, but it's for Snoop. Yeah.
I kind of like that sort of gimmicky stuff. It's cheeseball for sure, but it's hilarious and it fits him. And I love the almost sort of brazenness of the show, talking about weed all the time, having bongs on there. One of the point values on the Face the Devil round is 420.
Yeah, of course it is.
What caught me off guard was how much he says the word shit.
Oh, yeah.
He drops it all the time. Now, it's obviously in a very specific context, but he'll, there was the one that stood out to me the most. The category was called the Highlight Zone, and it was like sports highlights questions, but written in a sort of Twilight Zone sort of thing. And he'd start each one off going, all right, close your eyes and picture this shit. Or when they go into the describing what they're going to win, here's the shit you're going to win. It's just sort of offhand, and they don't censor it. It's crazy.
No, they don't bleep it out. It's very casual. He's got a little cocktail in his hand when he's out there drinking and having fun, and I'm like, I love the vibe of it. I mean, if you look at the audience,
they're all sitting around cocktail tables.
They are. It's cocktail tables. Yeah. it is a fun vibe for a show. I love it.
Yeah, they definitely had a 2-drink minimum at that show.
I think it's great.
Yeah.
Super awesome.
So, best I can figure, this version is not still running. But I can't really find anything about it. Apparently there was a 3rd season in 2019. That's when it moved from TBS to TNT, which is a bit of a weird decision, considering TBS's thing is like games and fun and TNT is like drama and suspense. But I guess maybe it's still running. I don't know. I couldn't find anything that said definitively one way or the other.
Yeah, I think the main reason for the move to TNT was because they were gonna partner it up or pair it up with the sports that they do. So that's the reason why it was going over there, so they could kind of like move it with that. Now, that being said, who the hell knows when season 4 was supposed to come out? It may have been 2020 with the COVID thing. You don't know.
Right. They still got a hype page up on TBS's website and with like clips and information and stuff. So like it's not abandoned, but I don't think it's like actively in production or anything like that.
Needless to say, I hope it comes back.
I do too. And if for no reason, just to have Snoop Dogg host a game show, like he's one of the greatest people in the world. And I love seeing him do stuff like this.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great.
Yeah. And, I was going to say, had this occurred several years earlier, I probably could have given a little more inside information since I used to work at TBS and TNT. But
oh, that's right.
Yeah, this all happened after my tenure there was over. So
that's too bad. You could have met Snoop, man.
I know, right? I got to meet Conan O'Brien and Andre 3000 while I was working there. So and RuPaul and the drummer from Mastodon. So I had my brushes with fame. It was pretty cool.
Well, the drummer with Mastodon, that's at the top of my list.
No, I'm sure you're a big metal fan.
I was being facetious.
I see.
Although I will tell you what, Andre 3000, if you have not seen Dispatches from Elsewhere, he's fantastic in it. I highly recommend watching it.
Yeah, he's also pretty much great in everything he does. So.
Oh, I know. Amazing.
Yep.
Anyway, all right, so it's time for us to do our ratings for this one, Mike.
What are we rating it out of? I guess Jokers, right? What
Jokers, man.
The Jokers are wild.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I didn't want to do it, because if the Jokers are wild, then there's no real value to them, right?
Well, I'm gonna take a page out of Snoop, and you got to rate this shit.
All right, I'll rate this shit. Gosh, I'm gonna actually go pretty low here. Okay. It's something that just occurred to me. We talked. This is not the ratings, but I just want to throw this out there real quick. We talked about how Jack Barry is really good at explaining the rules and is very thorough. And I just now put it together that since he created the show, that totally makes sense. Like, he probably is more familiar with the rules than any other game show host is of the game show that they're hosting, because he created the dang thing.
Right.
Anyways.
Yeah, true.
So with that in mind, I like the hosts. I like him. I like Snoop Dogg. I like Bill Cullen. The gameplay is fun enough, I guess. It's trivia. You know, I like trivia. But there's just, I don't know. Something about it is holding me back. I'm going to land on 2.75 Jokers out of 5.
All right, cool. And again, this is another week where I'm not going to be rating higher than you are.
Oh.
I'm going 2.5 Jokers for this. And as much as I used to love this show, and although I do really enjoy the Snoop show, it's still not enough that it wants me to come back and watch it every single week. I love it, but I don't love it that much. So I know 2.5 seems like it's really low, but that's technically right smack dab in the middle.
Yep. I mean, and so that's why this rating system is so weird, because 2.5 sounds so low, but it is mid-grade, so it's not bad.
No, and I, by the way, if you haven't seen Joker's Wild with Snoop, go watch a couple episodes of it. I think you'll really enjoy it.
It's a lot of fun, and maybe just the second season, I guess, if he's not doing all that great a job in the first one. But I mean, it's just a fun little wacky show. Oh, also, with how much they talk about weed, I saw an episode where one of the contestants was a cop.
That's great. Well, you know, and weed is so legal now in so many places.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm sure where they film it, it's totally legal, and I mean, it's not a big deal anymore. I just thought it was a funny little irony.
Right. All right, well, Mike, that's all the time we have for today.
All right, well, special thank you to Christian, the folks at Buzzer Blog, and of course everyone who's taken the time to listen to us each and every week. We love you all.
Tune in again next time when we'll bring you the latest and greatest in the world of game shows, as well as a brand new featured show too.
And remember, you can always catch us online, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and of course, tellthemwhatthey'vewon.com.
Please subscribe, share, like, and drop a review if you like what you've heard.
And if you didn't like it, I hope you have to face the devil.
Ouch. All right, Mike, I'll see you next week.
All right, bye, Tom.
You've been listening to America's favorite game show podcast, Tell Them What They've Won, a JTech audio production, copyright 2020. No part of this podcast may be reproduced by anyone without the express written consent of the creators. For more information or to contact us, please go to tellthemwhatthey'vewon.com.
All right, Tom, what'd you learn this week?
Well, Mike, I think I learned that I'm just not a big a fan as some of these shows as I was. There's certain shows like Double Dare that, you know, I'm definitely as much a fan of now as I was then. But this was just one of those shows this week that it's lost something on me over the course of the 30 years since I've watched it before.
Yeah, I totally understand that.
How about you?
This one's hard to put a finger on, but I sort of learned that I think there has been a shift in the sounds that audience makes when they cheer over the years. I think this is, the example I would give is if you ever hear audience cheering on the cartoon Rocky and Bullwinkle.
Okay.
There's a lot more of hooray sorts of sounds, maybe not literally the word hooray, but yay and hooray, that sort of sound. Okay. Whereas modern cheering is way more woos and yas. And I think the overall sound of what people make when they're cheering has changed. And if you watch an episode of, let's say that the run from the 70s into the 80s, watch like an episode from the 70s version and then watch an episode from the late 80s, and the sound of the audience just overall is different. Now, obviously, it's different people, not sure, but it's a distinctly different sound. I can't put my finger on it, but it's a thing.
Well, no matter what generation, I'm still cheering for you.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Copyright 2020, a JTech audio production.